Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 on our exploration of the mandated Eduqas short films to inspire your production of your own short film. I want to look today at Abraham's Connect, a UK film from 2010 of 5 minutes, which centres around a young woman who is fed up with the hostility of the city and its people, and the view that she takes of the world changing when she makes a surprise connection with a stranger on a bus. I've spoken previously about the idea of taking a broader creative or narrative inspiration from these films rather than merely looking at the technical aspects. And I've spoken about the idea of binary oppositions. I think they're really, really useful to you as a foundation tool to your analysis of any of the films that come up in the British, American, Hollywood, global, silent, experimental and documentary films from the exams. Binary oppositions, particularly between characters. So let's take a look at that in this, and if it's proving useful to you, please hit like, please subscribe to the channel for forthcoming materials that you'll be alerted to if you hit the notification bell. Here's a link that I will place in the description below that will take you to a copy of this 5-minute short film. Have a watch of it, come back and listen to our analysis, and then have a second watch. Inculcate it that way. I won't laboriously go over this every time, but you are required, if you are doing this many short films, however many your teacher picks, to evaluate all of them within your evaluative analysis. One way that you might do that might be simply, quite briefly, looking at why you won't be using a particular aspect of a film for a practical or logistical reason. Yes, you should be looking at crisis points and resolutions and technicalities like mise-en-scène, sound, editing, cinematography, but bring in that binary opposition concept so that you've got an overall broad narrative inspiration that may make or break a short film like this. Will it help inspire you in terms of establishing a narrator? Probably not, there's no dialogue in this one. Or a non-linear narrative, or parallel storylines, or distinct genre. So in our opening sequence, our central character is waiting for the bus, and she's frustrated and riled by the way that everybody else barges past her getting onto this bus. We cut to the blip, the reading of the Oyster card on the Oyster card reader. That establishes our setting. It's immediately recognisable to any of us from the UK who have used public transport in London. And then we get this dynamic of the difference between an underlying hostility under the surface of our fellow users of public transport versus a desire for connection. Do we want to stop and have a chat with a stranger, or will there be a hostility that riles the other person, or vice versa? And on a flip side of that coin, that kind of awkwardness of an inadvertent making of eye contact whilst everybody is thrust together like sardines in public transport, very much at close quarters, but not necessarily wanting to interact. The next shots establish the dishevelment, the fatigue, the tiredness of this man on the bus, and that in the next couple of slides, the way that, having inadvertently made eye contact, she quickly looks away to right of screen. And it's at this point that she considers putting on her headphones, and we get this her music comes in. It's diegetic sound because it's coming from evidently her over-ear headphones, her big headphones. But this shows our first hint that we don't gather straight away on a first viewing of her transitioning into this fantasy sequence. We've got these three characters very much staring into space in the mundane bus journey, shifting to this sudden extracting of a gun from the inside pocket. And for a brief moment we're thinking, oh gosh, is the genre of this film going to take quite a twist and turn? We imagine probably not, but then she actually gasps and is startled at the gunshot, and we think, oh, is this real? Before that's immediately subverted by his casually sitting down and taking out a bloodied newspaper, and the young man sitting next to him casually wiping away the blood. We know now what we were already relatively sure of through the music from the headphones, that we've gone into this fantasy sequence, and we immediately cut back to the three of them still in this mundane posture that restores the equilibrium of what was in the diegesis, the story world before us. As the young woman and the dishevelled, tired-looking guy are jostled around, they inadvertently brush hands, and she starts to think about perhaps rendering more of a physical connection by deliberately having her finger make contact with his hand. He starts making eye contact with her, and she still looks off camera, away, upwards, and I think that upwards use of performance and proxemics of her looking to the top right of frame shows that she's deliberately not making eye contact. He starts to return this gesture of making a little bit of physical contact, and her facial expression changes to a similar smirk to his, but now with a bit of perhaps embarrassment or wry amusement. She looks down this time, and he does something similar with a smirk, but is making a more confident eye contact than she is. As they actually start to properly hold hands or make eye contact, or at least link their fingers, something happens in terms of lighting that is absolutely not possible. This is a bus journey with fluorescent lights, and we've established at the beginning of our diegesis, at the beginning of the film, that it's dark outside. And yet, at the moment of making this connection, we get a piece of flare. I've sort of emphasised this by using a lens flare effect to introduce this particular image, but that lens flare is a fault, a technical issue with that lens when you are shooting directly into sunlight. That has definitely been edited in. I am absolutely sure of it, because there is no way in the circumstances of this bus, in the dark, using fluorescent lighting, that we will have experienced that kind of flare. The lighting here for meaning and response is establishing their emotional connection. This is abruptly brought to an end by another bit of jolting and bustling of the bus, and they're thrust apart as various people get off, including him. It's the briefest of connections. And now fantasy changes into the very synchronous choreography of the movements of the people on the bus, transitioning into what looks to us as viewers like a full-on flash mob as they start to dance together. And in an extreme close-up of the grab handles on the bus, we are left with the synchronous sound of that movement. very much being incorporated in the rhythm of the fantasy within her head. This sequence and that of the dance in Curfew of the Little Girl in the Bowling Alley very much had me talking with my last class about the flash mob sequences in Friends with Benefits. And I really did egg them on that I wanted to see some flash mobs in their films. We sort of partly got there, but not quite. So whilst the others are my examples, this one is one lifted directly from the board. Establishing the protagonists within the narrative, how is information about them conveyed? In just 5 minutes, the entire running time of the film, we see two sides to the girl. Firstly, that she's disillusioned with city life, she's shoved out of the way as she boards the bus, and then fantasising about a businessman assassinating an elderly lady in order to get her seat. Then, a different side, her connection of sorts with the man, and the imagined dance routine also show her romantic side, her optimism. We've gone from cynicism to optimism. I'd like to shoot somebody for my seat. But here, ultimately, her ability to see beauty, even in this dreary commute. Establishing other characters, the exhausted posture of the man, his shy smiles and gentle flirtation with the girl suggest that he's a kindred spirit. They're worn down by city life, but able to recognise and take an opportunity for connection. I think that's a beautifully eloquent way of conveying the meaning and response here. Establishing setting, whether it be time or place. The Oyster card reader and the bus are familiar to any Londoner, or I think most people in the UK, and culturally broader still. The lack of dialogue or exterior locations suggests that it could be set during the commute. Many passengers are wearing work clothes. I nearly misread that as weary. They are looking weary too. And it could be any city in that regard, or any country, especially enhanced by the racial diversity in the cast of extras that we see here. Creating enigmas. The Asian businessman pulls out a gun and we wonder if it's a journey that will turn into a crime drama. I wonder if there are any other enigmas created near the end of the film about whether she might jump off the bus and pursue the man for more of a romantic connection or not. Binary oppositions. Isolation versus connection. Exhaustion at city life versus optimism, as seen in that final musical sequence of flash mob style. Crises, how they're conveyed, the first contact between the girl and the man, the tentative brushing of fingers in close-up. Resolution, or open ending. Although the man departs without further communication with the girl, there is a sense that her optimism's renewed, perhaps conveyed through that flash mob imagined fantasy, and that perhaps, because of the routine of commutes, they might meet again on this journey again in the future, if not tomorrow morning, then next week, or what have you. If this isn't one that's useful to you in terms of genre or parallel structures or non-linear structures or a narrator, it probably is the closest to the runtime that you'll have to emulate. So, aesthetics for meaning and effect. What did you think was the intention of the filmmaker, of Abrahams? The intellectual message, the emotional response. Even in the bustling, unfriendly city, connections, however tentative and fleeting they might be, can be made. There's a beauty as well as hostility in the dreariest of situations. The fantasy sequences that the girl imagines are shot as if they're real, showing how solid her mental states are. Is the connection with the man also imagined? In terms of binary oppositions, interestingly, there are no aesthetic differences between the real and fantasy sequences. It keeps us guessing. We've got to form some active spectatorship here. It blurs the lines between what's real and imagined and what makes the actuality of her connection with the man ambiguous. Is it all in her head? You've got these options to fill in for me here. I suggest that you take pause at certain points throughout my videos, write down the headings for the boxes, and come up with ideas of your own. To help you do that, do go back to this link, or if you've not done so yet, find it for the first time in the description below, and map out your ideas that way. Thank you. If this has been helpful, please hit a subscription and a like, and if you hit the notification bell, then you'll be alerted to my forthcoming episodes, not just on further examples of these short films, but I also want to go on to some practical examples of the kind of shooting and editing that you might do, if I can wangle somebody that's willing to be filmed by me. And beyond that, how you might find other inspirations, not from the mandated short film list, and more importantly, if you're really struggling for ideas, some ways of creating narrative concepts. See you next time.